Well, hello there, YouTube. It's Tuesday, November 21st, 2023. And today I've got a video about turning 8 bolts in the driven plate. That's right, I'm working on the driven plate. I'm going to install the driven plate. I realize it's taken a long time for me to come up with this video. And the reason for that is there's been a lot of things going on in my personal life. You know, I still have to take care of personal things, you know, like my truck. I had to change the oil and, you know, things like that. But in addition to that, I've been working on videos, future videos for you. For example, it'll be about like the AC system, the condenser, you know, it's up there in the front. Well, taking good video of that would be difficult with the engine in. So I removed all that, right? So now we got bird's eye view, just like we did with the power steering unit, right? No engine. So you can see things you just can't see by trying to get them up underneath the engine, for example. Another thing is if I'm installing driven plates, that means the engine's no longer on the stand. And so that means I had to come up with something to hold the engine while I put on the driven plate. So at the end of this video, you'll see what I made for that, and you can see just how stable everything turned out to be. But I want to just get this video going. Like I say, I've been working all this time, so it's not like I'm just being lazy, you know, and the holidays are coming up, so who knows what's going to happen, you know. In a very, 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 very near future, I'm going to be joining the transmission to the engine, so, and getting ready to drop it in. I want to thank you guys for subscribing. You know, you guys are continually subscribing even though you haven't seen a video for the last couple of weeks. That's great, and you're staying there, which is great too. You know, you gotta stick this out. You know, don't unsubscribe. It's going to be fun. I want to go live. It looks like we're going to hit that target. I didn't look today, but I had quite a few. I mean, we're real close to 1,000 subscribers. And those of you who have been following me know that, you know, that's kind of the criteria kind of thing. So you don't have to limit the amount of people that are viewing and that kind of thing. You know, I just want to have all this to be out there. Just for fun, right? I just want all the support. You guys have been supporting me the whole way. You know, I'm putting together this whole engine. Every single nut and bolt. You see it all, right? Every single bit of it. The whole idea is to have the most documented 560 SL on the planet, right? I mean, you guys are going to see areas you can't even see on your own car, right? Unless your engine is out. So that's one of the things about this whole video. All my videos is to just document every single thing. And then what happens to that? More people are maybe interested in the 560 SL. And then the price maybe will go up. I don't know. Maybe. I need it to go up to, so when I die, because that's probably when that thing will leave, is when I die, somebody's going to have to cash in, right? So I want that price to go up. All right, well, let's just get this video going. Like I say, I promise I'll continue to go forward. So thanks for subscribing. So this here is our driven plates. When I removed it from the vehicle, I actually kept the orientation the same and wire tied it. And then when I cleaned it, I made sure I kept everything the same way. It may be very anal. There is a certain key right here that they all go on. So you've got this plate, this part, and then another plate like this on the other side. So a total of 3 parts there, plus your flywheel. I'll call this thing a whole thing called the flywheel. I call it driven plates, Mercedes does. To attach it to the vehicle, you're going to need I bought new bolts, and the reason is because we measured them and they were out of spec. So I would just say buy new ones. You know, there's a total of 8 of them. I think they cost about $6 each. So $48, and you're sure you're going to start off with a nice fresh bolt because you're going to torque these to 30 to 40 Newton meters, and then you're going to go a 90-degree angle. I'm going to use just a common ratchet. This here's 13 millimeter, and that is for these 6 screws right here. This is what goes onto your torque converter, and that's what tightens your torque converter to the flywheel. There's a total of 6 of those, and they have a spring washer. Each of them have a spring washer. And then you have your 8 bolts here, and here's the part number for that. and those are 19 millimeter. And of course you're going to need a torque wrench that can do angle of rotation. There's a link at the bottom of the description to the manual. Removal and installation of the driven plates. In a previous video, I've already measured all these and I've replaced all the bolts. In this document, it tells us that our initial torque is between 30 and 40 Newton meters, and then angle of rotation torque is 90 to 100 degrees. And here's the instructions. Remove the transmission, because this is for removal and installation. I've already removed the transmission. Unscrew the neck down bolts and spacer plates and driven plates with the ring gear. So basically they just take it apart. And we've already done that. Then it says to measure the neck down shank, which we did in that previous video, and we determined we needed to replace all those. And I want to also note here, as well as in the other video, is that these can only go on in one direction. So you can't, even both of these plates are the same width, same part number, everything is the same. You can put them on any way you want if that's what you want to do. I kept all mine in the exact order that I took them off. So the first thing I did, you may not have to do it, is I removed the rear TDC. All right, let's start with our first plate. Again, they're all the same, and they can only go on one way. It's got your little keyway down here. There's my key here. And then you just have to put this in really level though, or you're not going to get it in. It has to be square. And then you're able to get it on. And then confirm that all your holes line up. Next is this. Same thing, we've got our hole here, and we're going to line that up on the pin down here. There we go. And then our final plate. These have already have Loctite on them. So if you're using your old ones, this is a yellow Loctite. I've never seen a yellow Loctite. And I'll just kind of start bringing them down. And when I do, right now, it's because of the thread locker on there, you feel a little bit of drag. And then I'll just go to the other side and do the same thing. Make sure that everything feels good. There we go. Now just cinch them, make them feel all about the same. Just my wrist like that. You see how I have a washer up against there, and then I have my wrench, and then that wrench goes down, and then you see that bolt goes through the plate. Goes through, and then I have a couple of nuts on there, and then the wrench is resting on it. Just like that. So that's how I do it when I'm tightening up those bolts on the front. Alright, so our specs say that we're going to go between 30 and 40 Newton meters to begin with. I'm actually going to go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do that equally. Now I'm going in a star pattern. That's 10. And then I'm going to here, and I'll bring this one to 10. And then, like I said, we'll come back for a final torque. I reset my torque wrench to 35 Newton meters. So that's right in between 30 and 40, right? So let's go ahead and start here. There it is, 35. I'll mark that as being done. To the opposite of that one. $35. $35.3 actually, 35.3 on that one. $35.3 on that one. $35.2. $35, right on the button. $35. And 35, right on the button. All right, I've got this set for 90 degrees. And I will start with this one to begin with. Man, I tell you, 90 degrees is going to be a lot. Let's step that back and see what happened. Right there at 66 degrees is where my torque wrench just died. And at first I thought, oh my gosh, what happened? Did I forget my batteries or whatever? But no, I learned lesson number one. I've done two things wrong up to this point. The first thing that I did wrong is using this torque wrench to do the angle. What happened is that the torque wrench is only rated up to 135 Newton meters. Regardless if I'm doing an angle or not, the torque wrench itself has a built-in mechanism that says, uh-oh, once you've reached this, you're going to fatigue or you're going to harm your torque wrench. So it shuts down immediately. So I did not realize that, so you can't really use this to do an angle because I've already reached 135 Newton meters. What I should have done before I did anything was go ahead and draw my 90 degree mark onto that metal disc. That way there I would know where it needs to go. So if my wrench falls off or anything else happens, I have a reference point. Now luckily for me, I have video continuously running, so I'm able to find where that 90 degree is. So that's where I started. All right, this is a picture of when I started as I placed that wrench on there. And this is where I need to go. Well, this is where I am right now. You see where I am? Kind of in the middle there. It's not a perfect image because it moved a little bit when I moved it. But you see, I've got to go 90. And I also know that around 66 or 67, it failed. So I have my little scale that I can throw on there and mark that on the block. And I'm going to end up doing the same thing with all those. I went ahead and I added a bolt here. And you can see this wrench right here. And what I hope to do is with that wrench, use this and hold this up against it because I want to tighten that front damper pulley more Should at least lock it in. I have a big washer behind here to protect it, and then it's going to go right on that bolt, and it should work. There is something I forgot to mention here, and that is in my other video I mentioned it, and that is that these 8 bolts, they were class 12.9 is what came out of the vehicle. But the new bolts, new reference numbers, you can only buy it that one way. I bought directly from Mercedes. These are 10.9. So there's a difference there. And so I decided to kind of create some kind of a chart to figure all this out. So if you notice what the manual says, it says that you're going to torque and then you're going to angle torque. They don't say you're going to torque to yield. You're going to do what they call an angle torque. And that allows it, if you see this point, proportional limit, and then this elastic limit. So all the way up to that elastic limit right there, the bolts were usable. And that's why Mercedes tells you in the manual that you can reuse these bolts as long as they match within those requirements as far as stretch and the diameter and all that, which we did, and we replaced the bolts. Now we know we haven't reached this limit yet, but you know, there is a difference, of course, between a class 10.9 and a class 12.9. So I don't remember exactly how many Newton meters that is, but there's going to be a difference. But we have a little bit of playroom. If you see where it says deformation, once it starts to deform, so it goes after that elastic yield point, it's still reusable. And then it goes past that a little bit, and then once it gets to that point, it's no longer reusable. And then we get up to the ultimate torque, which is like what you would do on rods, right? Something that's going to be taking a lot of banging. You want to get ultimate torque, right? So it's going to have the ultimate strain, and that's the ultimate torque. And then you got that little curve where you're going past the ultimate point where you're going to get to the fracture point. So I kind of made this little graph to kind of demonstrate what happens, this difference. And you notice most of the bolts in this M117 are not torque to yield. You know, they tell you to reuse the bolts as long as they are within the limits. So here is just to let you know how it all works and the terms, in terms of torque. So the first thing I'm going to do is make my mark on that plate where the 90 is going to go. So that way there I've got my reference point. That's the only bolt that I've worked with. We know exactly how far we need to go and everything because I know where it failed and everything else. We're just going to use a different way of doing it. I'll put a dial on there and we'll do it together. All right, there we go. Now we can compare that with our marks. There we are. Yeah, we're pretty close. So there was our 67 degrees. We've got to go a little bit more. Yeah, it looks just about right. So that's one less thing to worry about. Now I'm going to go ahead and try to tighten this front damper pulley a little bit. Not full torque, obviously. So this ended up working out pretty good. I had no trouble tightening it. So I used that washer right there, that big fender washer, just to protect it. And then if it slipped, you know, as far as you're going to go is to the block. So that worked out quite well for this. So now I'm going to go old school with an angle indicator. And right now I've set it to 0. And for this first one, we know we got to go about 23 more degrees. Right there. I got to go just a little bit past that 20 with that dial. So let's see if I can do it. There we go, right there. That should be it. Let's look at our marks. It's hard to tell because of the angle, but that's pretty close to where it's got to go. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe the yellow off of all these other ones, and then I'm going to redo their yellow, and I'm just going to go up and down with the yellow so I can watch the head as I turn it. All right, I went ahead and took all the yellow off all these, and I used a black permanent marker so I could get a nice straight line. I used an edge, and then I used one of these to get my perfect 90. You can see over here I have a red line, right? There's one in there too, and one over there. I also put a white dot on the top of this socket. So you can watch this at the point where this starts to turn. And then you can watch the gauge on exactly where that is. Right now there's just a slight bit of tension on here, right? Like you would normally do. And I'm set at 0. And I got to go over here to 90. So you can watch at the point where this gauge moves, and maybe this doesn't, I don't know. I expect it to, but between here and there, there's a shaft. So that shaft can twist, right? Everything has to reach 35 Newton meters before this is going to start to turn. That's just the way it is. So they know that 35 Newton meters is a low amount, and old bolts and new bolts, as long as it's within specs, this is going to be super, super accurate if you get this at 90 degrees. And why is that? Because of this right here. This is my version of this torque versus torque to yield, TTY, whatever you want to call it. We're doing an angle torque, which is this first part right here of the angle, and that is to our elastic limit. And the reason for this is that they know, based on the pitch of this bolt and everything about the characteristics of the bolt, they know that by going 90 degrees, that's how far those threads will enter. And this is much more accurate than using a torque wrench. Yeah, torque just gets us there. I understand it's maybe 30% accurate or inaccurate, 30%. So it's really not all that accurate, but this torque angle is very accurate. I saw a report done where they took a block with 8 fasteners, we'll say, 4 on each side, and they brought them all up to a specific torque. And then pulled that apart and to see how many tons of power it took it apart. And it took like 15 or 7 tons or something. And then they did this method where they put it to a small torque amount and then this angle torque and did them all exactly the same, and that thing was able to withstand double. So that's the whole importance behind this and the mathematics and everything behind this. This is all math, guys. So we don't need to understand the math, we just need to follow the instructions, which the instructions say this thing, that fastener, needs to turn 90 degrees. And then of course it's going to spring back and everything. So let's see what actually happens, and we'll start to torque that. Let's go ahead and set this at 0, make sure we're at 0. There we are. And we can fine tune it with this. There we go. All right, let's see what happens. It appears that that other one is moving already, right? $90, right? Just maybe a tad over. It's pretty darn close. A lot closer than I thought it was going to be, guys. But that's pretty darn close to right where our line is, no doubt about it. All right, so that was opposite of this one, right? There we are. So now we're going to go ahead and move to the next one, which will be this one. All right, here's my next one. You can see the dot on top. It's a little bit off, but there we go. 90. And there's our bolt right there. All right, moving on to the next one. There's our 0. And we're ready to go 90. See the dot moving, right? Right there. 90. Perfect. Look at that. Right on the line. Next bolt. On 0. $90. Looking good. Before I do this next bolt, I just want to mention that this gauge is not the cheap gauge. It's one of the more expensive ones. It's actually rated at 280 Newton meters. And if you go on eBay or you go on Amazon, you go anywhere and try to buy this tool, I don't care what it is, the majority of them will not tell you what the torque rating is. But that's important to know. You got to make sure that the tool can withstand the torque values that you're putting at it. So this was the highest torque one that I could find. So it's a good one. All right, let's do this one. 90 degrees. Here we go. $90. Look at that. Right on our mark. All right, I'm set at 0. Right there. On my next one. Darn plane the second I do it, right? $90, right there. Perfect. Right on the money. Let's move up to the last one. Last and final bolt. I'm at 0. And here we go. $90. Right on the button, guys. There it is. It's perfectly flat. We'll take a look at all of them together. Well, there you are. I think everything just lined up darn near perfect. You know, you kind of have a better straight on angle there, and you can see these are all laying flat, exactly how I wanted it to do. I think the gauge worked great. It stayed sturdy. It did nicely. The dial moves real freely, so nothing binds like some of the cheap ones. There is one more thing, you guys, and you realize that it was 35 Newton meters to begin with and then 90 degrees. That was quite a bit of torque. You can't do this on an engine stand anyways, right? Because your engine stand is here. So no matter what, you have to do this somewhere. So I'll show you this little rack thing that I made, which you notice how sturdy everything was. It was quite simple to make. I just made it out of some wood that I had laying around in the shop. Firstly, I want to show that, you know, I have it on a hoist. So if something did happen, I'm protected. I have the hoist on the opposite direction, but I did that on purpose so I can close my garage door. So all it is really is just a box. And I have a brace that goes to the other side, and the other side's made exactly the same way. So I interlocked my corners here. So I have an inner box, and then I have two wings going on the outside, and then this attaches to that, which is right there for your motor mount. And the same thing is true on the other side. Then this over here is a box that I made with plywood, and then it's double 2x4 and everything to support all the weight. No problem supporting the weight. And then with those cross members, there's one on each side, you see. There's one on that side too, to help make sure that this thing doesn't wiggle back and forth, and that's why you saw it was very stable. And then these are just blocks of wood to support the height that I want. As a matter of fact, you'll see in an upcoming video, when I attach the transmission to this, everything was made for a purpose, and that is so I can easily just wheel the transmission right over to this and tighten her up. But that's an upcoming video. You guys have to wait for that. Well, that's it for this video. Thanks again for watching.